So now we are at the point of coming up to our fourth and final speaker. Just a reminder that after Alison has shared, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll have a Q&A session. For those of you that have just joined us, you are in a workshop, Sponsorship, How and Why It Works, which is the second workshop in a series of workshops put on the ACA by the ACA Healing Fellowship of the Central Coast of California. And our fourth speaker and final speaker today is Alison. And Alison first sought 12-step recovery in 2008 in response to a devastating estrangement from a family member. Her first programs were Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, where she worked the steps with her first sponsor, later adding CODA to her recovery program. In 2013, she read the Big Red Book, attended the first of many ACA workshops and retreats, and started 2 ACA meetings. She stopped drinking that same year and became active in AA. In 2014, she joined the ACA Step Study Group and found an ACA sponsor and became a one-on-one sponsor for the first time. She has served in many different service positions, as well as serving as a speaker at speaker meetings in each of these fellowships. She has gratefully found an enormous amount of healing as a result of her consistent involvement in 12-step recovery work. She recently felt moved to drop most of her service positions and suddenly finds herself sponsoring a number of women in ACA, from hurting to healing to helping. So I'm going to turn it over to Alison. So good to have you be part of the panel, Alison. Take it away.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to participate in this panel. I'm going to start off with why have a sponsor? It turns out it's difficult to recover in isolation. So to get the most out of ACA, it's good to have someone go with you on the journey. What we face in recovery is too intense to face alone. So part of what we do is we learn to ask for help and get it. And that's been difficult for some of us. And in order to make real progress in ACA, having a sponsor is important for that. And it's an opportunity for self-discovery. And I'm just going to go over a few things that a sponsor does. A sponsor guides the sponsee through 12-step work, if that's what the sponsee wants, and typically they do. That's typically why we seek a sponsor. A sponsor helps the sponsee understand the concepts of the adult child, the inner loving parent, higher power, the laundry list traits, some of the basic principles of ACA. And a sponsor is traveling with another person on the recovery journey. And I love the analogies of the kayak and driving in the car. A sponsor encourages honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness in a sponsee. A sponsor encourages the sponsee to identify, understand, and express feelings, something some of us have not done or not done well in our previous to ACA recovery. A sponsor it helps to resolve stored grief and helps the sponsee to speak their truth. A sponsor models, what does a sponsor do? A sponsor models healthy recovery themselves, has good boundaries, encourages activity in ACA recovery, like going to meetings, journaling, meditation, prayer, use of those sorts of tools. A sponsor is supportive, kind, and loving, empathic, compassionate, shows respect and understanding, is dependable and trustworthy, respects anonymity, and is honest. And it's a relationship of equality, ideally. Sponsor models good self-care. A sponsor is available with boundaries, and that's been talked about before. A sponsor is sort of like a good enough parent. Many of us, all of us, came from dysfunctional households where the parenting was less than optimal. And so it's nice to have a fellow traveler that can be all of these things, be supportive. A sponsor knows how to ask for help and get it, and shows mutual love and respect, and the sponsorship relationship hopefully includes love. I know I love my sponsors and I love my sponsees. A sponsor has good listening skills and reflects back to the sponsee what they hear the sponsee saying, so that I as a sponsee can hear myself, hear what it is that I'm saying. A sponsor in ACA is meant to be a guide, not a teacher, by sharing their experience, strength, and hope. They praise and validate the sponsee. The sponsor has serenity and emotional sobriety, and the sponsorship service is voluntarily given. It's freely given. A sponsor does not parent, partner, or is not a parent, a partner, a guru, or an authority figure. A sponsor does not judge, label, abuse, threaten, abandon, coerce, dominate, demand, neglect, intimidate, shame, bribe, or otherwise be detrimental to the sponsee. Does not invalidate the sponsee's feelings, and doesn't do for others what they can do for themselves. That can often be more detrimental than helpful. A sponsor doesn't become romantically involved, does not accept abuse nor give it, does not people please, is not a counselor or a therapist. A sponsor isn't pushy, sponsor doesn't give advice, doesn't criticize, and it's not meant to be, in ACA, it's not meant to be a teacher-pupil relationships, and there are no strings attached. There's a good chapter in the Big Red Book. It's chapter 11 that starts on page 365 that goes into more details about sponsorship. It's called ACA Sponsorship, Fellow Travelers. And if I have time at the end, I'll talk about some of the different sponsorship models. So how do we locate a sponsor? Well, one way is to attend ACA meetings, workshops, conventions, retreats, presentations, and keep your eyes open. And other service activities, we find a person who has worked the steps, is working a program, attends meetings, seems to have an understanding of ACA principles, and we ask what potential sponsors expect of their sponsees. And I think it's a good idea. It's been suggested to me to interview, and that's been alluded to here before as well. In other words, what's expected of me as a sponsee is a good question to ask. How often are you going to want to meet with me? What kind of homework are you going to give me? What do you expect of me? And really the most important thing in a sponsorship relationship is a good fit between the sponsor and the sponsee. And sometimes it isn't a good fit, and it's nobody's fault. Not everybody is for everybody, but having a good fit is really crucial. And a trial period is okay. Well, let's try this for X amount of time, 6 months, 2 weeks, 2 months, a year, and then check in and see if it's working out for both of us. When should we find a sponsor? As soon as possible. Once a person is committed to recovery, that is a good time to find a sponsor. And here's why I sought my first sponsor and how I found her. I came into 12-step recovery in 2008, right at the end of the year, because I was hurting from this estrangement with a family member. And I thought that Al-Anon and Nar-Anon would be a good place for me to find support. So I was attending meetings on a regular basis, and I knew I wanted to work the steps. And after about 3 months, there was a gal who had attended all the meetings that I had been at, and I had listened to her shares. And she talked about some remarkable things, the ways that she was using 12-step recovery principles in her life and how it was working for her. And it was quite remarkable. So She demonstrated that she was using the principles of the program in her life and how it worked for her. She had lots of years in recovery, between 20 and 30 at that time. And she had knowledge and understanding of the principles, the steps, some of the things that I've talked about already. She was really strong. Anyway, I asked her if she would be my sponsor, and she said, well, she had a lot on her plate right then, but she would give it a try. We'd have a trial period. And at the end of that, we'd see how it was working and if it was going to make sense for both of us to continue. Well, she was really strong, and excuse my language, what I like to refer to as kick-ass, which was very familiar to me because my mother was very strong and very tough. So that may be why I related to her. When working the steps, she had specific things that she wanted me to do. She wanted me, I had several books from several different recovery programs. So she wanted me to read everything I had on that step. She wanted me to call people in recovery and interview them about that step and how they had worked it, and how it had worked for them. Then she wanted me to do writing on the step. She wanted me to write my definition of each and every word that was in the step. And then she and I would talk. We had weekly meetings. Actually, at first she had me call her every day. Oh, and she suggested that 90 meetings in 90 days would be a good way to start my 12-step recovery. And I heeded that advice, which really helped me get started in a really good, strong way. So then we would have our meeting and we would discuss everything that I had, all the homework that I had done. And we would typically discuss each step for a few weeks. And of course, I was telling her about what was going on in my life. And it was always interesting because whatever it was, I got my license suspended because the cops thought I was talking on the phone or something like that. And she would say, every step we were working on, she'd say, oh, Alison, that's a perfect step one thing that happened to you. Write down what you're powerless over. And let's see, we were powerless and how my life is unmanageable related to what just happened to you. So it was always remarkable. And she taught me to find what she called the golden nuggets, which were what's the word I want? It'll come to me in a minute. Gratitudes about anything. I would call her in tears. I was very depressed back then. I was unemployed and couldn't pay my rent and, going in a downward spiral into depression almost every day. And she would suggest that I find something make a list of things to be grateful for about that particular situation. Well, that one where my license got suspended, what are you talking about? There is nothing positive, nothing to be grateful for about this situation, says I. No, Alison, I still would like you to do that. I mean, she wouldn't say, okay, you don't have to. And I just thought it was ridiculous and crazy. And I told her, it just makes me want to punch you in the nose every time you tell me you want me to make a gratitude list about this horrible thing that happened. You just don't understand. Well, I knew it wouldn't kill me, and I had a sponsor for a reason, and I respected her. And I thought, well, it's not going to hurt me to follow her suggestions. And I did. And guess what? There were a list of about 10 things that I found were positive about that situation. One was I was in a recovery group, and I had to reach out and call my friends in recovery and ask them for a ride to the grocery store. Well, guess what? I got to know each of them better, and it's a lot more fun to go to the grocery store with somebody. So that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had my license revoked. So she was absolutely right. And it got to the point where anytime I had what I considered a crisis, I knew what she was going to say when I called her up. So I just didn't bother to make the phone call. I just started making my gratitude list. And that was really good training and stood me in good stead. She helped me learn, I had trouble with trust of a higher power, and she helped me with that. She helped me with forgiveness of my parents, which I wanted to want to forgive them, but I had a real difficult time with it. And she helped get me there. So I was grateful to her about that. I was still drinking at the time, and she no longer felt comfortable working with me while I was still drinking. And so she terminated the sponsorship relationship. Well, of course, being an adult child, that was just devastating to me because, I felt like there was something wrong with me. And she knew me well enough. She said, I knew that was how you're going to feel. And trust me, it's not about you. You didn't do anything wrong. That was still kind of hard for me to get over. But then I had a temporary sponsor, and then I had another sponsor that relationship ended rather abruptly, and that was painful. And I had a temporary sponsor again, and then I found 12 ACA recovery, and again found a wonderful person who was attending the meetings that I was attending, and I really liked what she said. And she was working a really strong program, and I asked her if she'd be my sponsor, and she said yes. So I worked the ACA 12. Well, actually, before that, I was in a step study group, which is considered indirect sponsorship. We sort of had an agreement that we were sponsoring each other in the 12-step in the step study group. And I decided that group sort of fell apart, so I needed a sponsor, and found this one-on-one sponsor, and just went over all my 12-step work that I'd done in the workbook with her, and then continued up through step 12. So I felt really victorious that I had completed all 12 steps in ACA recovery. And eventually she said, I think you have enough recovery that you don't need weekly meetings with me anymore. You don't need a sponsor. It was like devastating. Oh no, I don't want to lose you. It was just such a lovely relationship. And she said, I'll be here if you need me. You can call me on an as needed basis. Oh, good. So so now I will skip to sponsees. A sponsee actively
5 minutes.
Thank you. Actively participates in their own recovery with honesty, respect of self and others. They are dependable, consistent, and they follow through on their commitments. They have regular contact with the sponsor. They accept responsibility for their own recovery. They participate in surrender, self-honesty, self-inventory. They're willing to seek and do God's will, willing to take action, and they are active in their recovery work, like meetings and service. How did I know when I was ready to become a sponsor? I had been in 12-step recovery for a while, had worked my 12 steps in Al-Anon, and someone who'd been in recovery for between 20 and 30 years at the time that I really respected and sort of served as a mentor for me, someone I would call occasionally when I had questions. We were talking on the phone one day and said, Alison, how come you're not sponsoring anybody? And I said, well, because no one has asked me. And I don't believe in recruiting sponsees. So I said, what do I do? And he said, well, if you feel ready, do you feel ready to sponsor? I said, well, maybe, I'm kind of getting there pretty soon. He said, let higher power know that you're ready to sponsor. And so I did in my prayers. That's what I did, as I talked it over with higher power. And after I had been a speaker at one of the Naranon meetings, a woman approached me and asked me to sponsor her. So she was my first sponsor, and it was a workbook style 12-step, and I took her through the 12 steps. And it turns out that's all she wanted, was to work the 12 steps. And so we agreed to terminate the sponsorship relationship when she got done with the 12 steps. I found that, wait, I'm looking at the wrong sheet. So then I didn't sponsor anybody for a while. It was after that that I worked with my ACA sponsor. And when I had finished the 12 steps in ACA, I had I'd had a few service commitments, and I just felt guided to drop them. And so I dropped all but, most of my service commitments. And right after that, a number of women asked me to sponsor them. So then I knew why the guidance had been to sort of clear my plate so that I would have the time and energy and attention available to sponsor other people. So a sponsor should have time in the program, have worked the 12 steps, familiarity with the laundry list, and so forth, a desire to work in a new and deeper way, and it's helping another. One of the things that I find so satisfying about being a sponsor, I feel like I have some experience and I have my background, so I have something to give that can benefit others, which is a way of giving back what I was so freely given. It's a way to be of service. It strengthens my own recovery. I learned to be a guide, hopefully without being an authority figure. I find myself sponsoring, I tend to sponsor in the same way I was sponsored the first time around, which is a little bit strident, shall I say, aggressive, pushy, not pushy, but not, thank you, not quite what we like ideally in ACA. So I'm learning to be more of to be a guide rather than an authority figure. I get to see the miracles. Hang on a second, my screen. Okay. I get to see the miracles of another person's recovery as well as my own. And I feel like I'm in a partnership with higher power. I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard things come out of my mouth that I would not have imagined. I usually pray for guidance before I talk to my sponsees. And by gum, that guidance comes. So if you want to read about the types of sponsorship, read chapter 11, and there are some lovely affirmations for sponsors and sponsees in there that I was going to finish with, but my time is up. Thank you for letting me share.